dude. That was good. I think that was it. Damn, my fault.
I was maybe 18 when a friend of mine introduced me to the UK show Skins, a show about a group of angsty teens causing trouble. You know, like what teenage audience wouldn't love a show like that? More importantly, at least to me, the show had a great soundtrack to it. Though it wasn't until we got to season 2 until we both heard a song that made us look to each other and agree we needed to find out who this was. That song was Torturous by Turnerjoy.
It's easy. Just float.
So both the song and the band were found, but there was virtually no information on who this band was. Eventually I struck some luck by finding an article written in 2000, which featured Turnerjoy and listed the names of who was in the group. But the information was about a decade old, no follow-ups on the band, their music, nothing. I would read comment after comment, people just like me looking for Turnerjoy, but little was ever addressed that I didn't already assume. Turnerjoy was just no longer together.
We're all from Chesterton, Indiana. It's a steelworking town. I think a lot of the people that lived there worked in the steel mills. My dad did, both my grandfathers did. So yeah, everyone kind of knows each other there. I think how it all came together is Dean and I started working in the same restaurant. We were busboys.
Charlie and I were pretty close friends because we would go to a lot of the same concerts together.
When you're not bussing tables, you're hanging out back, you're talking about music. Dean was working at a Kmart at that time.
And Larry happened to come through my line.
I came through.
And we just started kind of catching up a little bit.
Chit-chatting because we were in high school together. We were in show choir together.
He mentioned that he was drumming.
He's like, hey, I'm starting a band with Charlie, and we'd like to give you a tryout. So that's how it happened. They came over and listened to me play for, probably 20, 30 minutes. Then they said, we're going to go check out this kid named Marty that's an amazing, I think Marty was maybe 15, 16 at the time.
We knew we needed to kind of round out the sound. There was some more intricacies that we wanted to add to the music that we couldn't do ourselves.
I think what we really wanted to do, we needed an organ, we needed some keys. We couldn't do what we wanted to do without that.
Jody was a musician herself, took some piano lessons, but ultimately, had the chops to kind of sit in and kind of round that out a little bit.
I took every genre that I loved, whether it was jazz or definitely the 80s synthesizer sounds. I loved that. And I loved that feeling of orchestrated music coming into play and
All right, so we spent every weekend here. And then this is where we would rehearse. However, this wall wasn't here. It was like the equivalent of this room and that room. And then my dad converted half of our old rehearsal space into what looks to be a town bar now. So then smoke breaks were always taken right out here. We would kind of debrief on what we had just done in rehearsal, have a smoke break, and then just get right back to it.
We recorded Hope in Bloomington, Indiana, with Paul Mahern. He was the lead singer for the Zero Boys, which is the kind of the punk band from Indianapolis. Every city kind of had their punk band back in the day, and Indianapolis's was the Zero Boys, and they're amazing. And but then he went on to become a producer And he produced like John Mellencamp, and he produced a lot of the Indianapolis and Bloomington bands.
Recording Hope with Paul, when we were there and we were recording, and some of the songs were still kind of frameworks. They weren't exactly right.
Halfway through the process,
We were sent home essentially by Paul.
and we went and toiled over it, and that was the turning point.
I'm not speaking for the band, but for me personally, it was the first time somebody else saw something greater in us that we always knew was there. And for me, it was just like motivation.
We were already in the middle of Hope when we realized we can do this ourselves.
We knew that recording the album we wanted to record from the time we were in high school was in us. It was possible. But it took years to do it, but we never quit. I don't want that to sound cliche, but we didn't quit.
I remember at rehearsals, Charlie bringing in these little film excerpts, and it was about the war, and he played these excerpts. I would work off of that imagery in trying to get it into music. When I think about it now and how our sound was, is that it was all very torturous.
I wanted to be unpredictable. I wanted the more sweeping orchestration parts, and then hitting them with a guitar riff or something. It's just like stalking and attacking, pulling back, pushing forward. There was so much of that in the album. It's all pushing and pulling and doing all of these other things and layering one sound over the top of the other, sometimes to change and the entire feeling, like keep everything the same, but then like build and layer, and then pretty soon you've forgotten what the fuck you were listening to at the beginning, even though structurally or the framework is still all there.
There were a handful of people that I think went out of their way to try to help us. For one, there's Keith Cleversley.
You didn't even know what was going to happen from one moment to the next, That was very exciting to go there and experience that studio and the history in there and the things that he's done there.
He is a really talented, experienced producer. I mean, he worked with Flaming Lips and Mercury Rev, Hum. He's done some amazing albums. Charlie
and Dean. Charlie is very intelligent. I mean, he is a very, very smart guy. I believe he could have self-managed the band for us if it had gotten to that point in time. Dean too. I mean, they're both, and they were into that scene. They had the connections, and that was the big thing is Charlie was living in the city at that time, and he could stop by places and talk to people and give them CDs. It would have been nice to have, a label or someone. But we also felt that there were no restrictions. There was no pressure to get something done, now, this week, you have this much time. We just did it at our pace, at our leisure.
We did what we knew that we thought we were supposed to do. But we were music people, not business people, if that's not blatantly obvious.
I mean, frankly, there's a lot of bands out there that have done great things that never get noticed. In a lot of ways, I think some of the best bands ever, or at least some of the best songs and some of the best albums and some of the best guitar players are people that go completely below the radar. People that other people never get to see. And I think a lot of the reason for that is, if you are somebody who's really focused on music, and you're not putting the time into the business side of things, then you're just not doing the things that you need to do to get noticed. When Turnerjoy broke up, it was a little messy. You know, when Transplant was being written and when it was recorded, Dean and Jody had a small child. But I think the amount that we put into Transplant, the hours that we put into Transplant, I think it took a toll.
Yeah, you can't really recall all the other details, but I remember the feeling.
Somebody asked, Marty if he was okay. I mean, he took it hard. He really took it hard because he is just, that was all of our lives. But it was really, that's what the kid lived for.
It was just terrible. I'd put my whole life into it, and for however long that was my focus and that was my future, and sort of beyond my control was, stopped.
To this day, I remember he said, he goes, I think I just been told I had cancer. He goes, that's how I feel.
And there was nothing I could do about it.
And I think for me too, I was hitting a time in my life where I thought I should be having more kids. I should have, I can't keep pushing off things that, is this all I want to do for the rest of my life?
They were feeling like they were, both, not only neglecting their family obligations, but they're also missing out on, some pretty special time in their life. Now that I'm older and I have my own children, the years of your children being young, it's just the most special time of my whole life anyway.
It was like this very, very gradual, emotional and creative divorce that I never spoke of. It was too fucking painful. It was like having to say everything that I have said for the last 15 years is a lie. But it wasn't a lie. I truly did believe those things. I still do believe in those things. But I started wondering what else, what else is there for me?
I lost my way when we broke up. And I tried a couple other bands, and I had thought about, trying the Nashville studio scene. But then I got involved with my wife and, got a family, and that just, it just went to the wayside.
So the end of the band was like, you've seen E.T.? Do you remember, like, as E.T. dies and Elliot starts living? Remember how gradual that was? And they're both like on the gurneys in the hazmat tents inside Elliot's house, and like how gradual the death of one thing and the rebirth, I guess, of Elliot happened. All of that. That's what it always felt like to me, because it was about, like, they were giving. Fuck. So yeah, I think about it that way, because it was like I was letting the band go. I was leaving the band poorly, I might add. Something that I had to discuss with Charlie many, many years later. I think it was during his wedding. He graciously invited me to his wedding, and I was so thankful, because he's the one who opened the door to further conversation, because I was terrible at communicating how I was feeling, and I didn't know how to end it. And we had this show with a pretty popular band and all of this other stuff, and I was just like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I just like lopped it off at the head. And for me, it was like that E.T. moment where I was just like no longer living for the band and living for my family. I was gonna do that now, because I knew I couldn't do both anymore. And so it was like I had to let Turnerjoy die so that I could let my family live.
Later, I learned from the group that the show with the pretty popular band Dean just referred to was Turnerjoy opening for the Brian Jonestown Massacre in Chicago.
We made it, but not by traditional definition. We did what we wanted to do. We made the record. We made the record we wanted to make. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's relevant today, which still fucks me up to think about. So we did that, but by traditional definition, or by, we didn't make it. And that's been okay. I mean, that it's been okay for us not to make it. But maybe not. I don't know. I'd be lying if I said that I didn't want the entire world to hear the record. Because I do. But I don't know how to make that happen.
Yeah, it's something that I would like to do again. I mean, if I had the permission to dream a little bit, I would love for there to be, one big show that we could play together again.
I still have everything I need, and then some. There was a little box that Dean would run his vocals through, and then we called it the Bocker amp, People would ask, what is that thing? It's a Bocker amp. Well, it obviously makes sense now, but I have all that stuff, and, anytime somebody's ready to do that, I am.
If I didn't have the job constraints I did, I would buy a kit tomorrow and show up at the practice space. I'm in, I can bet my arm that you'll talk to Marty, and you've already talked to Charlie, and Charlie's probably already in too. He would, he would be all about it. I think Dean and Jody would too.
I have to say that I think that each of us probably is thinking a little bit more than we ever have before. Like, could we work on something else together? Would it be fun? Would it be worth it? Would we have something to say? Would we continue, or would it be completely different? I'm very curious as to if we'll all get back together. Not being around that creative process for a very long time, you miss it. And you start to realize things, and you kind of want some of that back. Maybe not the whole picture, but you definitely want to be a part of that writing, that process of working with others to create music. It's fun, and it's challenging, and yeah, I would love that. If it would come into anything, I don't know.
Would you even be interested in that?
Yeah.
About a month later, I got a text message from Dean. They were really back, and this project wasn't over.
As a local official, I could only disclose the information after being authorized. A lot of people didn't understand this.
I think Americans should be prepared that they're going to have to hunker down significantly more than we as a country are doing.
Premonition or paranoia, you annoy her with your hesitation. It's no good